Well, it's early. You might have missed this. And there were some big-time fireworks at President Trump's annual State of the Union address last night. Well, first off, the president did lay out his 2020 agenda, one day before his likely impeachment acquittal and one day after the chaotic Iowa caucus. But it was Speaker Nancy Pelosi's reaction to the speech that is going viral this morning. Eamon Javers joining us now from Washington, which I guess we got to hashtag everything nowadays, right? It's hashtag rip it up, rip the speech. Yeah. What's trending, Eamon?
Yeah, you know, in the old days, you used to try to get the soundbite out of the speech that everybody would play on television. Now you try to get that meme that's going to go viral, and this one certainly did last night. The president giving what was in parts a starkly partisan speech, and he was met by a starkly partisan reaction. America's political divisions were on display last night in the House chamber as the president gave his third State of the Union address. The opening part of the speech, Brian, was all about the economy. The president making the case ultimately for his reelection by suggesting that the economy is strong. And, of course, he talked about his favorite metric, which is the stock market. Take a listen.
Since my election, U.S. stock markets have soared 70%, adding more than $12 trillion to our nation's wealth, transcending anything anyone believed was possible. This is a record. It is something that every country in the world is looking up to. They admire.
Yeah, but Brian, I think a lot of what's going to be remembered from last night is the president's showmanship and also that partisanship that we saw on display. The showmanship was the president inviting a number of guests to the box, the First Lady's box, observing the speech. And at one point, he surprised a military family, reuniting them with a soldier who had been deployed overseas. At another point, he surprised a young girl with a scholarship to school. So those were dramatic moments in a sort of a reality TV kind of a way for this president. The partisanship, though, was on display as well. The president awarding talk show host Rush Limbaugh the Medal of Freedom in the gallery, being presented by the First Lady, as you see there, Melania Trump presenting the actual medal to Rush Limbaugh, who is, of course, a talk show host, very conservative, who's made a career out of excoriating Democrats and liberals, who's recently announced that he is suffering from cancer. So a dramatic moment there. And then finally, that moment at the end that you talked about at the beginning here, Brian, Nancy Pelosi, who had been sort of grimacing and visibly frustrated throughout the speech, simply ripping up her copy of the speech right at the end and kind of casually discarding it to the side there. As you see, Pelosi very frustrated. She was asked about that afterward, and she said it was simply the most appropriate response given her choice. The implication being that she could have done something more dramatic, and that was the most polite way she could think of in the moment to express her displeasure with what she had just heard in the House chamber, Brian.
Eamon, I need to know, do you think she planned to do that?
That's a really good question. You know, she was holding those notes, the presented speech that she was given by the president throughout the night, and sort of holding them up and checking against them and following along. Hard to say whether that was preordained. You know, there was this moment at the beginning where she reached out to give a handshake to the president. Not clear to me whether the president intentionally snubbed her or simply didn't see it because he was focused on giving her the document and then turning back to give his speech. Maybe she felt frustrated that he hadn't shaken her hand.
Yeah, that's what I was, when I was about to question you, Eamon, that's what I thought. I wondered if it was in response to that moment where, right, you couldn't quite tell. Was he purposely ignoring her? Didn't he just not look at her and realize that she was extending her hand to him? And
yeah, hard to tell in the moment. She grimaced.
She clearly looked miffed when he didn't shake her
she
hand.
Looked like she expected him to shake her hand, and he didn't. And she looked like she felt snubbed. Not clear to me that the president actually saw the hand go out. But look, she did not introduce the president with the traditional, ruffles and flourishes in terms of the language. It's my distinct honor and privilege to announce. She simply said, ladies and gentlemen, the president of the United States. So this was a Nancy Pelosi who went in there sort of in a way dealing with an impeached president, not to give him all the honorifics. So I think the pump was primed for this, and whether it was intentional or preset or not. They were on a collision course, and we saw what happened.
A number of high-profile Democratic congresspeople who just decided not to show up.
Sure, AOC being one of them, announcing that she just simply couldn't be there in the chamber to listen to this. And you saw Pelosi very frustrated as the president ticked through policy after policy after policy that she starkly disagrees with. And then with the flourish of presenting Rush Limbaugh with the Medal of Freedom in the First Lady's box, I mean, that is a provocative gesture by the President of the United States.
Has this ever been this partisan? Because I have to say, I didn't like her ripping it up, but I didn't like the fact that AOC was. But I don't know if you tell me. Give me some history here. Is this been the way of the world? Have there been Congress people who have decided that they're not showing up before to object?
You have to really go back to the 19th century, I think, to see this kind of partisanship. I mean, you read about the pre-Civil War era in the American Congress, and you're reading about duels and fist fights on the floor. Somebody got beaten with a cane.
Well, that's important to remember,
Eamon,
because when people say it's never been this bad, we can say, well, there were times when people were dueling.
Yeah, but it's never been this bad.
But it wasn't going anywhere good at the time that it was this bad before, right? I mean, so, there's a famous stain. There's a staircase in the bottom of the House chamber, marble staircase, and there's a stain on that staircase. And it is said, the legend is that that's the blood stain of a reporter who was beaten nearly to death by a congressman for asking a rude question, and it's still there from the 19th century. Right. I don't know if that's true, but that's the apocryphal thing that is always said. But those years were brutally partisan and physically brutal. We haven't seen actual fisticuffs yet in Congress, but you do get the sense watching this that maybe we're not that far from it. It was, the seesaw partisanship, the cheering and booing. It was America's political division on very, very stark display last night.